2020 kx250 owners, something you may want to keep an eye out for. I don't know if it's this particular bike or more bikes in the same year model or around that. Helping do a valve adjustment on this motorcycle. Pulled the cams out, done my shim adjustment, started bolting it back together, started torquing it back down to sequence. And in doing so, the screws number 5 and number 6, here and here, those two would not torque to specifications. And as I was getting fairly close to the torque specs, I could really feel one not even getting close. And I was afraid, oh no, we got threads pulling in this thing. The first time was done at a dealer. Now, I'm not saying the dealer did or did not do anything wrong. I'm not gonna make that accusation. But what I am saying is the tolerances on this motorcycle when it comes to the length of those two screws are so close that if they stretch at all or get over torqued at some point at all, then they will actually stretch and bottom out. And that's what I ran into here. And I'll show you some photographs of both of those screws. One of them measures real close to 42, but even it, whenever I seated it down by hand until it bottomed out, and then I measured the cam cap of where it would seat, it would actually start bottoming out just barely before it started seating into your seating surface on your cam caps. So that is something, when I get ready to put this thing back together, I'm gonna take a bolt and I'm gonna show you how I do it. I'm gonna take about 1/2 millimeter off the new bolts that I'm putting in here, and I'm gonna make them 41.5 millimeters, and that'll give enough clearance to where they should tighten down to where I know they're not gonna bottom out, because 42 is bottoming out. I mean, the 42 is bottoming out before I'm getting to torque specs. So, and I measured one of them, I'll show you, really stretched a lot. So it was obvious it was bottoming out. And the other one, I don't think was quite, it was just barely starting to stretch is what I was feeling. And I'll show you something you can look at your little bolts to give you an indication if yours might be stretching. But I would definitely, before you do your valve adjustments on these things, I would order a couple 42 millimeter screws. Me personally, now I'm not gonna tell you you should do this, but me personally, with the new screws, I'm taking 1/2 millimeter off of them, and that way I know that they're not gonna bottom out whenever I torque down my cam. And I'm pretty sure whenever I do that it's gonna go to spec, everything's gonna be good, but the other bolts are just so close that they may be bottoming out from the factory. I'm not positive. This is the only machine of this particular model that I've worked on, but in this bike, that 42 millimeter bolt is bottoming out before it tightens down the cam cover properly without stretching that screw. So, all right, I'll give you some more information shortly. Here's the two screws that came out of the head. Check out the one on the left, right above the shank. Look how narrow that section is and how much that bolt had stretched. This thing was really close to breaking. I'm taking a measurement of the bolt on the right. You can see I've got my caliper set at 42 millimeters. So you can see this one's pretty close, maybe a thread long, but it was pretty close to 42 millimeters. This is a picture of the bolt that appeared not to have stretched as much. It's this one's right at just a couple of threads over the 42 millimeters. And if you really look closely at the end of the bolt, you'll see how the threaded end is sort of pushed in and rolled over just a little bit. That is a good indicator that a screw or a bolt has bottomed out somewhere. Here's what the end of a new screw looks like. If you notice, it's relatively sharp. Sometimes there'll be just an ever so slight bevel, but you can tell it hasn't been pushed over. The first picture was pushed over, and as you can see in this one, it's a relatively sharpened edge. It's not rolled over like the first picture. Kawasaki specifies that bolt as a 42 millimeter long bolt. So I took a bolt, made sure it was 42 millimeters long, and I threaded it into the head until it bottomed out. So, by hand, I didn't want to tighten anything, so I just went all the way down till it lightly bottomed out, and took this measurement because I wanted to see how much height that was from where it was bottomed out to where it should be whenever it was touching the cam cap. I got 847 thousandths high from the bottom surface of the bolt until the head. Now I measured the thickness of the cam cap itself, and as you can see, that's 846 thousandths. Looking at these two measurements, you can see that as you begin to tighten that bolt down to torque down your head, that the bolt is beginning to bottom out in the taper that's in the threaded portion of the head at the same time that it's trying to torque against the cam cap. So there lies the issue that we ran into. I did check the screw measurement in both locations, and they both measured the same. So I believe both of these two holes, the screw length is ever so slightly too long, or too long to actually torque down correctly on this particular bike. Here's how I'm going to take care of the problem. Now, this is how I'm taking care of the problem on the machine I'm working on. It is up to you and totally your risk if you do this or not, but this is how I'm taking care of it on mine. I think it's going to be a good solution for me. Take my new screw, take a nut, thread it on there before you grind off. This is 42 millimeters. I'm going to make it 41 and a half. So the reason I'm threading that nut on is I'm going to go and I'm going to grind. I'm going to grind a little bit off in this region to bring it down to my length. After grinding it down, taking measurements from my bolt length to make it 41 and a half from the bottom of the bolt flange right here to the end. I'm gonna do 41 and a half millimeters. Then I need to unthread this nut. If you have much of a burr, see right now, it won't hardly turn. The reason is there's a burr from where I was grinding. Take your wrench, socket, whatever you need, and you work that back and forth several times where that nut's threaded on. You do that half a dozen times or more till it starts getting really nice and smooth, because if that burr, you want to make sure that burr is rolled over for a nice smooth transition. If you don't, it will grab when you try to go into that aluminum head and you can do damage. So you want to make sure that you get it to where it's just really finger, see it's starting to get nice and loose and finger tight again, to where I should be able to roll it on and off without a tool. And as soon as I can start it and roll it on and off a couple of times really nice and easy by finger, then I know that I should be good putting it into whatever I need to put it into. It was really tight that first time coming off. It's starting to get even looser. I'm going to go a couple more times and then it should be ready for an installation. So I'm doing this on both of those screws. I'm using 2 new screws, 1 in each location, 5 and 6. The reason I'm doing that is because I'm positive those 2 other bolts had stretched. All right, let's see how she went after my shortening of the bolts. We'll do. Okay. Number 5. Number 6. Number 7. And number 8. We are good to go by shortening the bolts. Hopefully this little issue is just a one-off problem with this particular bike, and that nobody else runs into it, but it's just something to look for. Overall, this bike has shown to be pretty darn reliable and absolutely a blast to ride. Please subscribe and hit the notification button. Now go ride it like you stole it.